Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry,
Okay.
when I moved my mic, I must have hit the mute button.
Cool. We are now live.
Fantastic. Welcome to With Thunder's Applause, a podcast where two friends geek out and talk about the end of U.S. empire and the possibilities facing us. I am your host, Steve.
And I am Zach.
Co-host is Zach. And today we're shifting gears from foreign policy to talk about education. Because one of the many things that comes up in our discussions of foreign policy and other issues is the fact that we as a society, especially in the United States, are dumbed down by our education system. And we are cultivated into these creatures that just consume advertising and then go consume products. So we're going to talk a little bit about education, right?
Yeah, and how you can find places on maps and know maybe a little bit about them, so you hate people a little less because you know them more. Wouldn't that be great?
Great. Absolutely lightning fast check-in. We were talking before we went live about the weather. We were both in Central Valley, California, in different parts of the valley. If you didn't know your geography, to your point, California has a very long valley in the middle of it. And we live kind of not exactly at opposite ends, but not near each other. And we just had a heat wave of dude, it was like 10 days, 115 degrees. And then
yeah, it was bad.
awful.
We were talking to some of the people, in a game that we both play who are in areas that are known to be hot. And, it's like, oh, it's like 115 degrees here. And they're like, what the hell? First of all, don't know your freedom units.
46 degrees C for our non-American. That's another thing to talk about education. Why imperial and why fucking, why Fahrenheit and feet, man? Meters and centigrade is so much easier.
I've been doing like a little bit of baking. I kind of took a hiatus, of course, but doing a little bit of baking, and I prefer the ones where they weigh it out by grams because it ends up with a more consistent product.
It's the scientific method of doing baking, which baking is kind of there's an art to it, but it's more science than art.
Way more science than say cooking a steak. There you can just be like, yeah, good.
I think it's good. Yeah. Anyway, so it cooled off and it's remarkable. And I kind of would rather be outside, but then the chore that needs to get done is cleaning chicken shit. So I'm like, yeah, let's record the podcast.
Let's put that off till later.
Put that off a little.
And that's why we're doing this on Monday.
Precisely.
All right.
Anyway, so let's get into you put together a few clips.
Yeah, I think I got some good shit.
Good. And we're going to talk about perceptions of education, both by the recipient or rather the consumer of the service.
Literally, yeah.
And some deeper analysis, I believe.
Yes.
And then that fits into our greater conversation that we've been having long term about how do you adapt to changing material realities at the end of empire in ecological overshoot, among other things, while also facing this kind of conditioning we have to an industrial economy and an imperialist economy. And so education is a big part of the challenge for getting people on board with voluntary transition to a post-carbon economy. And it's also essential to avoiding the worst kind of possibilities inherent in this kind of social decay and unraveling, which is, we've discussed also, fascism, QAnon, all this kind of post-fact bullshit that we're dealing with.
Yeah, when you lose your ability to critical think, you're very easy to control.
It's super easy to manipulate you. So anyway, go ahead and introduce the clips. What do we got?
Will do. Here we've got something from the PBS NewsHour. It has a couple of interviews. We skipped over the first one. It is a child from Hong Kong who laments how he was going to have to stop playing soccer once he got out of what is their version of middle school due to the highly competitive nature of colleges in Hong Kong. And fortunately for him, maybe not so much for his education, his father got a job in the U.S. and he is now able to pursue his love of soccer and other things like interpersonal relationships, to the detriment of his education, though.
Or their friends across the pond like to call it football.
Football, yes. He calls it soccer. It's very strange. I don't like it.
Hong Kong is also known for being a place that does very well on international tests. Unlike the US, where the academic performance this year was lackluster. The US ranks in the middle of the pack when it comes to reading and science. In math, it ranked 31st out of 35 countries.
Yeah,
The
not
PISA
great.
test is taken every 3 years by 15-year-olds from dozens of countries. What makes this test interesting is that it doesn't gauge what students can memorize. In other words, what you can Google. The PISA test looks to see what students can do with what they know.
They are asked to interpret texts, solve mathematics problems.
Andreas Schleicher oversees the PISA test. He says the school systems of today are the economies of tomorrow.
You look at a country like Korea in the 1960s. Korea had the level of the economic development of Afghanistan today, one of the least developed education systems. But it got education right. It became one of the most successful economies. The power of education to transform societies and generate, both economic and social outcomes is just tremendous.
Economic prosperity, international competitiveness, national security. Those are a few of the reasons countries take education and, by extension, these rankings so seriously.
Can you pause
President Obama said back in 2000.
Sorry. It's just kind of interesting because is that not just the dominant worldview being imposed on education, right? Like, oh, we need it for competitive economics, or we need it for national security because, like, terrorism or whatever, or
having to rely
violence
on people coming
Yeah.
to our country to fill in the gaps that we don't have because we don't educate our own people well enough.
Yeah, I mean, that too, but like it's just kind of the framing I wanted to draw attention to, that it's like, yeah, educational opportunities, because like, I'm a good case in point. I am a highly educated individual. The bachelor's, two associates, and a master's degree, and I use none of it professionally and use none of it to benefit the capitalist economy.
Yeah.
Now, has it prepared me for a lot of the things we're discussing here? Oh yeah. Like I see crystal fucking clear. But as far as using education as a means of economic mobility for us millennials who graduated college, like I graduated college like 2 months before Lehman Brothers collapsed. Like most of us have not seen economic opportunity the way that we were told. I'm the first one in my college, in my family, both sides of my family, to go from high school to a 4-year university and graduate. My cousin got a degree before me, but like she, or no, I got a degree before her. She did get a degree eventually, and my other cousin did it eventually, but like 6, 7, 8 years, because they were kind of like night classes and stuff like that. I was the first one to go full time from high school to university, a 4-year university. And that's what my grandparents wanted. That's what my parents wanted. And
oh, you're
gonna do so good. You'll make like 6 figures. No, you won't. I mean, in some career fields, you might.
Yeah.
But most you won't.
A good example, there's a video, I didn't include it, but it's a guy from the UK and he's talking like, hey, at the start of this video, I just want to say that if you're a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, you could just stop watching this video. You have to go to university. And that's really where the focus for them is, like these 3 things just require so much education, you can't get around it. You can get trades and other things, but you're not going to allow it to be learned on the job to operate on someone.
Right. And they structure their education for trades. Like a lot of the guys that did that were downrange in Afghanistan on the base with me, who were from the UK, and they were like part of like a group of electricians. Every single one of them went directly from secondary school into a trade school. And by the time they were like 24, 25, they already had enough on-the-job experience that like some of them started their own like proprietorships or whatever.
Right.
Like got a truck and then started doing like house calls and shit.
That is a common story for trade schools and countries that have like really good apprenticeship programs. Here it exists for like electrical work, AC work, and plumbers, and that's about
plumbing,
it.
For sure. Because I know some young people that got into plumbing and construction trades, and especially the construction trades where we're at, because fires keep fucking burning towns down.
You need all the construction workers you can get.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention it. The town I grew up in, our check-in, the town I grew up in, Foresthill, is like threatened by fire in a real way. Like everybody's evacuated, mandatory evacuation, and all that.
Right
shit.
now.
Yeah, and the fire line yesterday afternoon was like at the edge of town, so like some housing is inside the fire line, but like the actual main street and all that shit is still outside the fire line, but everything is closed down. So anyway, construction trades have good apprenticeship programs. You can go ahead and resume the clip. Can you camera off for me on the next part of this?
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
2009, countries that out-educate us will outperform us. The US spends markedly more money compared to other developed countries on education, but by high school, American students fall behind. Schleicher says it's not about how much a country spends on education, but how it spends the money. He says in other countries, it's all about teacher quality.
And I'm not only talking about making teaching financially more attractive, I'm also talking about making teaching intellectually more attractive. And that's probably where the United States is furthest away from some of the highest performing education systems, where you really have a much greater investment in the quality of teaching.
We're back.
Excellent.
And that's going to transition into our next video. Basically, the idea is that in the United States, we don't value teachers very much, and they don't feel valued themselves, and we don't invest in the quality necessarily of our teachers. We have a lot of standards for them, but it's not, the top priority at the school, as I'm sure anyone who's gone to college knows. Typically, the highest paid person by far is going to be an admin.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen that. So that this is part of that financial, I think. I'm not positive. I'm not super well read on the specifics of this or what people who actually spend their time thinking about these issues, what their opinions are. But my kind of like a bird's eye view opinion of the situation is that you see the growth of in the cost of administration for colleges, universities, even public primary and secondary schools increase with financialization, especially at the university level, where like the student loan incentives, like, and all that stuff, like with financing education, and you see debts balloon at the same time admin salaries balloon. And basically you have a bunch of young people who are not going to be able to spend their earnings, should they be able to get a good job. They're not going to be able to spend those earnings into the local economy or the national economy or the global economy. They're not going to be able to use those because instead they're sending it into the financial sector to pay off debt that they didn't need to take because we didn't need 30 new fucking administrators. And it's just like new offices. And I get some of them are very important. Like, now you have like diversity and equity and inclusion officers and like all these admins, but like, I think we need that function, but like, do we need entire new offices with 30 staff? And even the lowest paid staff there is like enough to live, not like wealthy, probably like, low 20s, maybe mid 20s, but the administrator's making 400 fucking grand.
Right. And I was going to say, in the 6 years that I went to school, 6.5, the tuition doubled, and the administrator, or a top dean, pay increased from 300 to 400,000, which kind of dictates that I have to pay more now to make sure that person, and like, what are they providing exactly? That is worth all that much money. That's always been my question. Like,
well, right, and I could totally see like the necessity of some kind of cost of living adjustment. If you are kind of in like the upper echelons at a university, then like you're not just doing like a bureaucratic function. You're not just going to meetings and signing papers. Like you do have to be a face person, right? Like, and so like that's like the generals, right? Like in the military, it's that way. You got way more money for housing when you were higher in rank because you were expected to look like you should be taken seriously. And if you paid someone 30, if you paid the major or the light colonel the same as you paid the airman or seaman, then you would not have like that kind of air of authority that money brings, unfortunately.
Fancy dress.
But base that on the cost of living. We face that with our own city manager. Our city manager gets paid more than the governor of California.
Jesus.
Now the governor gets like a house provided for him, and he's got a bunch of staff that just belongs to him, whereas the mayor has like a single assistant that also gets paid quite well. But anyway, like it's just remarkable when you're trying to deal with problems and like administer a city when you can't identify with a single fucking person that lives here, because your income alone is 8 fucking times the median, not the mean, right? Not the average. The average income is actually significantly lower than that. But because we have a university with professors who get paid well and a ton of admin, plus we have a major regional hospital with a bunch of nurses and surgeons who make good money, so the median income is actually considerably higher, and this dude makes fucking 8 times that. So like, how can you do your job and be a public servant when you can't identify with the people you're serving? It's not. It's just a way to get
to you. They are literally the poors.
Yeah, exactly. They don't fucking know. They don't live in the neighborhoods where there's problems. They live in the fucking gated community, or in the really nice section with the nice cul-de-sacs with the big fucking houses with boats and RVs in front of every one of them. They don't know what it's like to live in the poorer neighborhoods with the slumlords, right?
Living out behind the brewery and all that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, kind of beating a dead horse, but I did want to talk about salary a little bit, because something I found as I'm looking to piece together some side gigs and shit, and I have a lot of education, and I actually do have considerable teaching experience now, working with an organization teaching permaculture design, and I went on the school district's website just to see what it would take to be a sub, the TB test, all that other shit, background check with criminal background. Okay, that's fine. I understand the need for those. But what I found remarkable was the pay rate for a sub. Like, you have to go 10 days for the same teacher to get like an incentive, like long-term sub rate. But other than that, like, you're looking at potentially what is a substitute teacher that works a full day. That's like a 9.5 hour day, right? With lunches in there too, right? And you have periods between class, but it's a 9. You're gone away from home for 9.5, 10 hours,
right? And
it would have basically, if you took the flat, because they pay you a flat rate, it's not hourly. Like, per day you get paid X amount, right?
Right.
And it winds up being like 16.5 fucking bucks an hour. And right at the top of the website where they talk about the pay rates and stuff, it's in bold, like they're all bragging about it, like, due to teachers, staff shortages and blah, 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 we've raised the rates. Please see below for the new rates. And I'm like, if you're only paying $16.50 now,
what the fuck were they?
Dealing with a bunch of shitheads, and like not really knowing what to do because you're not the teacher making the lesson plan. You're just kind of like basically a glorified babysitter,
right?
And not to denigrate substitute teachers who've done it for a long time. I'm not saying it's just babysitting. I'm sure there's a little more to it, but like, you're not really responsible for lesson plans and stuff.
Right.
And you're getting paid $16.50, and it's like, fuck, bro. I'm pretty sure the McDonald's across from the high school is starting at 18.
Yeah.
And
you want
you're not going to work
children?
more than an 8-hour shift because they don't want to fucking pay you overtime.
Right. And it's like, and you want me to educate your little crotch goblins? No, I'm not doing that.
So anyway, I was just to the point of teachers not getting paid enough. I was just like, holy shit. Like, I knew they were underpaid. Like, and my kids go to like a public charter, and they're constantly like, please donate. Like, we need every family to donate $200 a semester for art supplies. And it's like, fuck you. You're a public school.
Yeah, you get all the same benefits as a public school. Like, don't try to
But
make it
it's
out
hard
hard.
because
Yeah.
I mean, and especially with COVID, and I don't want to go too far off, but like they went with the state, of course, went super lax on COVID. People are coming to school fucking sick with COVID.
I mean, there's no longer a requirement to isolate. So what do
Right,
you
and
expect?
but even though like it's still making people really fucking sick.
Oh, for sure.
And the
Yeah.
reason that they don't fucking care and don't want to send kids home from school that come in with snotty noses and shit and don't even want to test them, like do rapid tests or anything. The reason is because the way that funding is in at least the California school system, they don't get paid unless the butt's in the fucking seat.
Yeah.
So they don't give a shit if like some kid comes there and is all snotty and gets some other kid sick and they take it home and kill their ailing grandparent.
Yeah.
Like the school's like, it's not your ailing grandparent isn't my fucking problem. My problem is to make sure your ass is in that seat so I get fucking paid.
Funding. Yeah.
It's fucking insane, dude. Anyway, I'm just gonna get upset about it. This looks nice. Excellent elephant, gray, strong.
Let me bring you to the front again. There we go. We can see you again. You can't see that you can see you, but I can see that we can see you.
Yeah, I wish there was some kind of marker.
So what makes Sophia stay and Anna leave? And how can the United States keep more of its teachers in the classroom?
Yeah, sorry. So they set up an imaginary thing where you have, I think it's Anna in the US and Sophia in Finland.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
In the US,
that's great
teachers work about
I like
9
their
and a
stuff.
quarter hours a day. That's an hour and a half longer than the
Just like you were saying.
average for teachers in other countries in the Organization for Economic Development, or OECD for short. That's a group of mostly wealthy countries that economists often compare to one another. Teachers in the US work more than 2.5 hours longer than their colleagues in South Korea, Finland, and Israel. There are some countries with similar teacher work hours to the United States, like New Zealand, Singapore, and the UK. Teachers in Japan, for example, work nearly 2 hours more per day than teachers in the US. But in all of these countries, teaching hours are much lower. Of the 9.25 hours that American teachers work every day, they spend about 5.5 of those hours actually teaching. That's more than the OECD average, and significantly more than teachers in New Zealand, the UK, South Korea, Japan, and Singapore.
I just thought that was interesting that Japan actually has less time teaching, but they're still there like 11 hours. And I wonder if that's part of their culture of like, oh, I have to be on the job all the time.
Yeah, I think if it was a poll of individual teachers and they said, how much do you work? And they said they're working 12 potentially. But the thing is that American teachers aren't working 9 hours and 15 minutes.
Right. That's how much time is in the classroom.
They go home
and
to do their lesson plans because they're not given enough time. And I think that's probably where that is.
Right.
Now, Japanese teacher doesn't have to deal with the students as often. Maybe it looks like about half of their workday is directly dealing with students. And the other half is training, meetings, staff stuff, grading papers, making lesson plans, keeping up with your discipline so that you can continue to be a better and better teacher. By if you're even just like a secondary school history teacher, you're going at least into the popular magazines and reading and thinking and being an intellectual, even if you're just a secondary school teacher.
And watching TikTok so you know how to talk to the kids.
Right, exactly. But in any other kind of, I don't have control. He's the guy in charge of OBS. But he was telling me before we went live that
that was us.
That as soon as I finished fixed my issue with Comcast, he developed one.
That was on my end.
I'm just gonna turn this light off.
That was on my end. Fuck that, man.
No, that's not my light.
No. I'm sorry. I'm saying